Kentucky's first matchup with the Razorbacks was pretty rough, but this time in Rupp Arena, I think things are going to be just a little easier for the Wildcats.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for various SEC-related things, but on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check out all of them today at nissanusa.com. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with the Arkansas Razorbacks. Going to talk about what the Hogs do well, what they struggle with, kind of harp on some things that we saw in the first contest between these two teams, and then give a final score prediction at the end of the show. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms, and if you are listening on podcast, please subscribe to the show wherever you are tuned in. If you are listening on YouTube, would appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks, first of 3 games to wrap up the regular season. Arkansas in this first matchup with Kentucky scored 57 points, which has not usually been the case for this Wildcats defense so far this season. In fact, Wildcats are really struggling to hold opponents even under 75 to 80. Night in and night out, and yet earlier on in the conference slate, Kentucky was able to hold the Arkansas Razorbacks to just 57 in their home gym. Arkansas shot 33% from the floor, 21% from three, 72% from the foul line, all numbers that I expect to be better in this contest, but I think Kentucky on offense will probably take a step forward as well. So what do the Hogs do well overall? Well, this team, I think the biggest thing that they do is they get to the foul line better than almost anybody, not just in the SEC, but in the country. They currently lead the SEC in conference play in free throw rate, which is just free throw attempts divided by field goal attempts. Just shows you the percentage of how often you get to the foul line as opposed to taking a field goal attempt on any given possession. And the Razorbacks get to the line 43.8% of the time. That is their free throw rate, and that is insanely high. That is first in the SEC and fourth in the country. Actually, if you look at just the stats for Arkansas's entire season, they get to the foul line 46% of the time. That is insane that they are almost at a 50-50 clip of whether or not they take a free throw attempt or they shoot a field goal attempt on any possession that they don't turn it over. Again, the Razorbacks, I think outside of that offensively, don't have a whole lot going for them. They don't turn the ball over a ton, but it's really what they do at the charity stripe that gets them going. They shoot 73.3% from the line. That is good for 121st nationally. Not a great mark, not a bad one, but I think where they make their money here at the charity stripe, it really does show in their point distribution. So you know how much I love KenPom and how much I love their different stats and the scouting report that they have on every individual team. And KenPom tracks something that's pretty easy to follow called point distribution. It's the percentage of points that a team or their opponent gets from 3, gets from 2, or gets from the free throw line. And the national average of percentage of points that a team gets from the foul line is 19%. So let's say the average team in college basketball scores 100 points on a given night. According to these metrics, 19 of those points should come from the charity stripe. Arkansas gets 25.4% of their points from the free throw line. That is insanely high. That is third nationally. And to be honest with you guys, There are different players that I like on this team that we will discuss here in a second, but as far as strengths go, statistical strengths, this is about all that Arkansas really has, at least on the offensive end of the floor. Defensively, Arkansas has the 8th best shot block percentage in the country. So they block a ton of shots. They get to the foul line on offense. But if you look around at some of their other numbers, if you look at what they've done against quality opponents so far this season, they've really struggled, and they've not been able to put together a complete product, which is just really weird considering how consistent Eric Musselman has been with these transfer portal pieces that he has had over this last half decade now, where he's just been able to figure it out once the tournament gets here. But Arkansas currently at 14-14, 5-10 in SEC play. They're not going to make the NCAA tournament. They're not going to make the NIT. They may not make the CBI if they get an invitation there. So the Hogs just have had a very disappointing year with some players that I thought were going to be a lot. I think they were going to be more effective with their contributions, is what I thought coming into this year. I thought Arkansas was going to be one of the better teams in the SEC, and they have really disappointed so far. So what do they do well individually? Well, you have to look at their lead guard, Tramon Mark, averaging almost 17 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, shooting almost 50% from the floor and 38% from three. All really, really good numbers for a team that's averaging almost 76 points per game. Not a bad offense, not a great one per se. Subpar at shooting threes, subpar at shooting from the floor. But really, Tramon Mark is kind of what gets this team going. He's a great shot creator. Whenever they like to run in transition, he's really good at identifying what needs to be done within a given play in transition, whether that be pull up for a three, go to the rim, pull up for a mid-range jumper. He kind of defines what this offense has been so far this season, which is just a little chaotic and not all together. And that has led to some of the inefficiencies, which we will dive into later on in the show. But it's Tramon Mark averaging almost 17 points per game. You can also look to Trevon Brazile, who is averaging 8.4 points and 6.2 rebounds per game, former high-profile prospect that will have more opportunities, I assume, to show out with Arkansas next season if he decides to return. I don't know what the feel around Fayetteville is there as to whether or not Brazile will actually come back. If I'm not mistaken, Brazile was hurt last season, and now he's able to actually play for the Hogs, and he's been okay. He's not been great, but again, that's kind of been the motto for this Arkansas team so far this season. Khalif Battle, 12.7 points per game, shooting 39% from the floor and 37.8% from three. Again, not phenomenal numbers from this Arkansas offense, but those are kind of the three guys that make this team work. If you want to go back to the Arkansas game from the first contest between these two teams just a few weeks ago, you can also look to Makai Mitchell, who came off the bench and had 12 points, was 8 of 10 from the foul line. Yes, 8 of 10 from the foul line. Also had 13 rebounds and 4 blocks against the Wildcats. He could be somebody as a forward who has been in this conference for quite some time. He could be someone that jumps in on the action here as something positive for all Arkansas here. But on the whole, the Hogs have not been great so far. And let's dive into some of those statistical inefficiencies, maybe some things that they really struggle with in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. SUVs like the new 2024 Nissan Rogue. It is perfect for city drives and great escapes. It's got class-exclusive Google built into the car. It is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is also the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Nissan's incredible lineup also includes the 2024 Pathfinder. Has room for up to 8 different people, an expansive cargo capacity, and an advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. You can shop all of these different SUVs at nissanusa.com. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, if you have not subscribed to the show already, whether that be on podcast or on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you went ahead and did that. Really appreciate you guys that have joined up and have been giving your thoughts in the YouTube comments and over on the socials. Appreciate every single one of you. And if you are new to the show, sub. It's a great place to be here at Locked On Kentucky with some really fun content here to wrap up the season. So we talked a little bit about what Arkansas does well, sprinkled in with some negativity. Now let's talk about what they don't do well. They just don't do offense very well on the whole. So like I mentioned, they average almost 76 points per contest, but it is on very inefficient numbers, and they get even more inefficient when you look at their numbers just in SEC play. So let's take a look here at Arkansas just in conference play with help of our friends at KenPom. KenPom doesn't know me, but they're my friend. So efficiency. Adjusted offensive efficiency is a statistic we love to talk about here on the show. Just essentially tells you how efficient your offense is. Well, Arkansas ranks 13th in the SEC in that statistical category. They rank 12th in the SEC in field goal percentage. They rank 13th in offensive rebound percentage. They rank 12th in three-point percentage, 13th in two-point percentage, and they rank 12th in an interesting statistic I don't talk about enough, non-steal turnover percentage. What does that mean? Well, it's just turnovers that are not steals and how often they commit those on a given possession. And Arkansas does that 7.6% of the time, which may not seem like a lot, but to have a turnover that is not stolen 7.6% of the time that you come down the court for a possession, that's a pretty high rate, all things considered. Arkansas on offense plays more chaotically than they have, I think, in the past 2 or 3 seasons underneath Eric Musselman. Now, I may be completely wrong. I don't study Eric Musselman in the way that he runs his sets and the way that he likes to do his offense, but just based on my observation, watching their games, a couple of them in person this season, watching their games, it does not seem like there is a lot of direction or a lot of focus, especially when it comes to the half court. Arkansas takes a little bit of time to try and figure things out on certain possessions, and it ends up, it creates a lot of really bad shot quality. It creates a lot of really inefficient looks. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, they take a bunch of mid-range jumpers and they need to stop doing that, like I've been saying for years here on the show about how Kentucky runs their offense. No, it's not mid-range jumpers. It's just off-balance shots. It's weird shots at the rim. It's the way that they kind of run their stuff. It's just like, what is the spacing looking like here? And in the past, when I've talked about Eric Musselman and the Arkansas Razorbacks, I have praised Musselman for being really good against Kentucky at creating different sets and being in just really making me think about the way that the Wildcats need to guard the Razorbacks and kind of creating all these different things that you don't really see in a whole lot of different places. Talk about spacing, just kind of like making things look different on a basketball court that you don't really see from time to time. So I've praised Musselman in the past, but this year they just have not had it on offense. They have just not been where they have in years past. And on defense, it's not much better. Talking about things Arkansas doesn't do well, their defense is not that great from an efficiency standpoint either. They're 10th in the SEC in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're 10th in the SEC in effective field goal percentage, 11th in turnover percentage, 10th in offensive rebound percentage, 12th in free throw rate, 10th in three-point percentage, 11th in free throw percentage, and 12th in steal percentage. they just don't really do anything outside of shot blocking well on that side of the ball. They've been ineffective, just not been good, point blank. Now, the interesting thing to me, and this may tie into what we're going to talk about here in a second, which is just the matchup, is Arkansas does not give up a ton of points from three, while opponents are almost shooting 35% from deep on Arkansas in SEC play. They only get 26.7% of their total points from beyond the arc, which is 11th in the SEC. So Arkansas gives up a high percentage of shots made from three, but they don't give up a ton of looks from three, or at the very least, opponents look elsewhere to go get their shots. And primarily it's focused on the rim and the foul line, especially. So how does Kentucky look at the game previously played and say, okay, are we going to play into that? Or are we going to try and shoot a ton of twos and see if we're successful at that, which we failed at last time? Kentucky only shot 36.5% from the floor. Or are we going to try and attack the three-point line as much as we can, even if Arkansas tries to prevent it, because we shot 45% from deep in the previous contest. Shepard hit 2 threes, Reeves hit 4, Mitchell hit 3. It's just going to be up to this coaching staff. Also something that could be interesting, how does Zvonimir Ivisic factor into this with the way Arkansas likes to play defense? Can you run some more pick and pop stuff and just hope that Ivisic, if you give him 3 to 4 3-point shots, is he able to hit a couple? Is he able to go back to what he was looking like against Georgia, which will probably not happen again, but hitting a couple of threes here, I think it'd be really big to kind of build momentum in a certain part of this game. So let's dive into the matchup, the individual matchups here, how we think it's all going to shake out. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet over on FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets if they're with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if the bet wins. And you can bet on all different kinds of NBA props, your favorite NBA players. There's a ton of Kentucky Wildcats to choose from, obviously. You can get in on quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe previewing Kentucky basketball versus the Razorbacks. So, talked about what they do well, free throw line, block shots. We talked about what they don't do well, just about everything else from an efficiency standpoint. We talked a little bit about their defense and how Kentucky may match up with that. Let's think about this further. So Arkansas is currently top 60 in the country in average height. They've got some guys down low that could give Kentucky some issues. Makhi Mitchell, most notably, like we talked about, Jalen Graham, who has not seen the floor, I believe, since mid-February. And I don't believe that he's going to be available for today. Just based on what I've seen, he's recovering from injury, and it's possible that he returns. We'll see what happens. But Jalen Graham could be back, a senior that's 6'10". Makhi Mitchell, by the way, 6'10", 240. So got some weight to him. And then Travon Brazil, who is 6'10", 220 that we talked about earlier in the show. So you've got 3 different guys at your center position that you can rotate around. You've also got Chandler Lawson at 6'8", 210 pounds. Jeremiah Davenport at 6'6", 220 as a senior. You got some really veteran, experienced pieces in your front court that you can throw at the Kentucky Wildcats. And I think this is going to have to come back to, okay, can Ugonna Onyenso have a good performance? And against the Hogs last time, he actually had a pretty decent outing. 25 minutes, was 3 of 4 from the floor, had 4 rebounds, 3 blocks, 1 turnover, and 3 personal fouls. And if Onyenso starts, my assumption is that he will get those 25 minutes. And my hope is like he was last time. He is effective, not just against these bigs, but also, there's no other way to describe it, these shot-chucking guards that Arkansas's got. Look, Kentucky's got them too. Kentucky's got some guards that love to chuck up shots, but Ellis, former Louisville player, was 3 of 10 in this game last go-around. Tramon Mark was 5 of 17. Khalif Battle was 3 of 10. Again, just bad shot selection from players that I believe Arkansas has that can be better, that can be more effective. I don't want to sit here and diss any of these guys individually because I think that they're very talented athletes that have high potential. They could go off in this game against Kentucky and make it really interesting from an offensive standpoint. I don't know. But I think it starts with the way that Kentucky guards things down low, not just with Onyenso, but there's not an individual player to highlight here. This is Thiero, this is Edwards, this is Bradshaw, this is Ivasic. This is anybody that wants to guard an individual player on Arkansas that feels like they want to drive to the basket and draw a foul. Kentucky has to stay disciplined in this one. Kentucky got called for 19 personal fouls in this last go-around. Arkansas, I say, only got 18 free throws because they normally get a lot more than that just based on the way that they like to play basketball. But Kentucky's got to be disciplined like they were this past go-around. You got to focus up, and I think defensively you will have the opportunity to do what you did to Ole Miss. You can prove that in Rupp Arena you can shut down an opposing team that has less talent than you and is kind of streaky / in the bottom half of the SEC. Kentucky's going to have the chance to do what they did to Ole Miss again. And I say the chance because I want to go back to what I just said a second ago. Arkansas has 3 different players, 3 different guards that I think can have nights where they go off. I think they've got good players. And that's what keeps me concerned in this one, is that while Arkansas, from a talent standpoint, I think is less talented than Kentucky, they're still respectable. I think this is still a respectable opponent. So it kind of gives me some concern. Can Kentucky, on defense, stay disciplined? We'll have to see. Can Arkansas produce a more competent offensive product than what they did against Kentucky in the first go-round? Again, only 57 points. I say that as though Kentucky didn't score 63 themselves. Just a really bad day for offense all around. But I think it does start on the defensive end of the floor for me. Because Kentucky, I think, can open this up offensively much better than they did last time. I think Kentucky can get 80 plus in this contest. I'm curious to see if Kentucky can hold Arkansas to less than 80 plus. And so my final score prediction here today, because I'm not quite sure what Arkansas's offensive ceiling in this game is. I know what Kentucky's is. I'm not quite sure what Arkansas's is. I will say Kentucky wins this game. I'm pretty confident in that. Ken Palm only gives Arkansas a 9% chance to win this game. I will say Kentucky wins this contest 86-77. We'll get a 9-point victory at home. Curious to see what the Vegas line is on this, actually. I looked at that earlier today, and there was not a line for it out just based on where I was looking. So we'll just have to wait and see what the line is. But I think Kentucky wins by 9 or 10. And if they win by more than that, if they lose, we'll have something interesting to talk about this weekend. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.